Avery Brooks had long ago stopped believing that love came easily to women like her. Not because she wasn't strong, not because she wasn't intelligent, but because she had watched again and again how the world treated black women who refused to shrink themselves for comfort. At 29, Avery was the senior events coordinator for a boutique gallery in Manhattan, one of those polished spaces where wealthy donors drank expensive wine while discussing art they rarely understood. She had learned to read rooms the way a chess player reads a board. Who held power, who pretended to hold power, and who quietly controlled everything. That night's gala was no different. Champagne glasses clinked. Soft jazz drifted through the air. Billionaires, collectors, and socialites moved through the room like expensive ghosts. And then she saw him. He stood awkwardly near the buffet table, studying the price list beside a tray of hors d'oeuvres like a man calculating whether he could afford to breathe. His jacket looked decent but worn. His shoes were clean but old. And his eyes, blue, thoughtful, observant, did not belong to a man comfortable in this world. Avery approached with her professional smile. "Enjoying the event?" she asked politely. The man gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "I'm actually trying to figure out which of these I can afford without embarrassing myself." Avery blinked. "They're free." Relief washed over his face so genuinely that she couldn't help smiling. "Good," he said, "because the last gallery event I attended charged $12 for a single shrimp." "You went to the wrong gallery," Avery replied. He extended a hand. "Ethan Whitmore." Avery Brooks. Their handshake lingered just a moment longer than expected. Not romantic. Not yet. But curious. Over the next hour, Ethan stayed near her station, quietly helping guests find seating and carrying extra glasses when the catering staff became overwhelmed. No ego. No arrogance. Just a man trying not to be in the way. Later, when the room thinned out, Avery noticed him studying one of the paintings, an abstract piece worth nearly $500,000. "You like it?" she asked. Ethan tilted his head thoughtfully. "I think it's beautiful." A pause. "But if someone asked me to pay $500,000 for it, I'd politely pass out." Avery laughed, really laughed this time. For the first time all evening, the gallery felt human. As guests began leaving, Ethan hesitated near the door. "Would it be incredibly inappropriate," he asked carefully, "to ask the event coordinator if she'd like to grab coffee sometime?" Avery studied him. No flashy watch. No arrogance. Just sincerity. "Coffee," she said, smiling. "I can afford." They agreed to meet the following Saturday at a small cafe in Brooklyn. Ethan insisted on paying, and when the bill arrived, he checked the price before ordering. Avery didn't know it yet, but the quiet, careful man who worried about the cost of coffee was actually Alexander Whitmore, founder of a private tech empire, and one of the youngest billionaires in America. He had attended the gallery that night for one reason. Not art, not networking, but to see if a woman who fascinated him from across the room would still choose him if she believed he had nothing. And as he left the gallery that night, Ethan Whitmore smiled quietly to himself, because Avery Brooks had just passed the first test. What he didn't realize yet was that Avery Brooks had secrets of her own, and if she ever discovered his deception, the test he designed for her heart might destroy his. Avery Brooks did not fall easily. She had trained herself not to. By the time she was 29, life had already taught her that charm could be rehearsed, kindness could be strategic, and interest could disappear the moment a woman stopped being convenient. So when Ethan Whitmore began showing up consistently, on time, attentive, funny in that understated way that sneaked up on you, Avery didn't mistake consistency for character. Not yet. She simply noticed it. He remembered how she took her coffee. He listened when she spoke about her work without trying to impress her with his opinions. And when she admitted she sometimes skipped lunch during major gallery installations, he showed up the next week with 2 sandwiches and no speech about taking care of yourself, as if feeding her was not a performance, but a reflex. That should have made things easier. Instead, it made Avery cautious, because men with little often wanted saving, and men with too much often wanted control. Ethan somehow seemed to sit in the middle, careful with money, but not bitter about it, humble, but not insecure. He told her he worked as a consultant for a small investment firm, contract-based, unpredictable income. It explained the modest apartment he claimed to rent in Queens. It explained why he always suggested simple places. Bookstores, food trucks, free jazz nights in Harlem, late walks over the Brooklyn Bridge. And to Avery's annoyance, she enjoyed every one of them. There was something disarming about a man who didn't treat romance like an invoice. No grand displays, no expensive manipulation, just presence. Still, Avery had rules. She did not lend money to men she was dating. She did not move fast because chemistry felt convenient. And she did not tell anyone, especially a man she barely knew, about the brown envelope locked inside the bottom drawer of her dresser, the one containing overdue legal notices tied to her late mother's estate. Her mother had died 18 months earlier, leaving Avery not comfort, but complications. Hidden tax debt, an old property dispute in Philadelphia, and a final letter Avery still had not found the courage to open. Most nights she told herself she was handling it. Most mornings she knew she was lying. 2 months into seeing Ethan, the wall between affection and attachment began to thin. Then one Friday night, everything tilted. Avery had invited him to the gallery's spring donor preview, more out of curiosity than trust. She wanted to see how he moved in rooms where wealth had its own language. Ethan arrived in a dark suit that fit too well for a man who supposedly worried about coffee prices. Not flashy, just precise, controlled, expensive in a way only people with real money understood. Avery noticed it immediately. So did everyone else. During the reception, she turned from a conversation with the curator and froze. Across the room, a silver-haired investor named Leonard Voss, one of the city's most feared private equity figures, had just shaken Ethan's hand. Not casually, respectfully. If stories like this matter, comment and subscribe to Melanin Chronicles. As if Ethan were the more powerful man. Avery's stomach tightened. She watched Leonard lean in, say something low and urgent, then stop cold when he noticed her watching. Ethan turned. Their eyes met across the room. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked like a man caught without a script. Then Leonard smiled at Avery and said, clear enough for her to hear, Mr. Whitmore, I didn't realize you were still keeping this a secret. And suddenly, Avery wasn't wondering whether Ethan had lied. She was wondering how much. For the rest of the evening, Avery Brooks tried to convince herself she had misunderstood. Maybe Leonard Voss had mistaken Ethan for someone else. Maybe it was some inside joke between wealthy men who enjoyed confusing the rest of the room. But the way Ethan avoided her eyes told a different story. The reception continued around them. Soft music, polite laughter, the quiet hum of money exchanging hands. But Avery barely heard any of it. Her mind replayed Leonard's words again and again. Mr. Whitmore, I didn't realize you were still keeping this a secret. Secret. The word echoed like a stone dropped into still water. When Ethan finally approached her, he was careful. Too careful. You've been quiet, he said gently. Avery studied him. Same blue eyes. Same calm expression. But suddenly she noticed things she had ignored before. The way his posture changed when powerful donors passed by. How several executives greeted him with subtle recognition. How the gallery director himself had shaken his hand earlier with a little too much respect. You know Leonard Voss, Avery said. It wasn't a question. Ethan hesitated. Professionally, he replied. The answer came too quickly. Avery crossed her arms. Funny, she said softly. Because he spoke to you like you were the one in charge. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced around the gallery as if measuring the distance to the exits. Avery. No, she interrupted calmly. Don't start with my name. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Just tell me the truth. Silence stretched between them. For the first time since they met, Ethan Whitmore looked like a man standing on thin ice. You're making this bigger than it is, he said quietly. Avery stared at him in disbelief. Bigger than it is? She gestured subtly toward the investors, still glancing their way. That man manages billions of dollars. And he just called you Mr. Whitmore like you're his boss. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not the nervous smile she had grown used to, but a different one. Calmer. More controlled. Avery, he said, lowering his voice. You know how sometimes people exaggerate relationships in business circles. It was a clever answer. Smooth, almost believable. But Avery had spent years navigating rooms full of wealthy men who specialized in polished half-truths, and she recognized one when she heard it. "You're lying," she said. Ethan froze. The words landed between them like broken glass. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Avery leaned closer. Not angry, just certain. "I don't know what you're hiding," she said quietly. "But I know this." She picked up her purse. "A man who lies about small things usually lies about big ones." Ethan's voice followed her as she turned toward the exit. "Avery, wait." But she didn't stop. Not until she reached the gallery doors. Only then did she pause. Without turning around, she said one last thing. "If you want to keep seeing me, Ethan." Her voice trembled slightly. "Next time, bring the truth." And then she left. Back inside the gallery, Ethan Whitmore stood very still. Across the room, Leonard Voss watched with quiet amusement. "You're losing control of your little experiment," Leonard said when he approached. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He simply looked toward the door Avery had just walked through. Because Leonard was wrong about one thing. The experiment wasn't out of control. It had just reached its most dangerous stage. And the truth Avery demanded was far more complicated than she imagined. Because Ethan Whitmore hadn't only been testing Avery's heart. He had been trying to protect her from a world that would soon learn her name. And once it did, her life would never be simple again. If stories like this matter, comment and subscribe to Melanin Chronicles. Avery barely slept that night. Not because she was heartbroken, but because something about Ethan Whitmore's lie didn't make sense. Men lied about money all the time. Some exaggerated it. Others hid it out of embarrassment. But Ethan's lie felt constructed, too deliberate, too controlled. She kept replaying the moment Leonard Voss spoke to him. "Mr. Whitmore." The respect in that voice hadn't been accidental, which meant one of two things was true. Either Ethan Whitmore was far more powerful than he claimed, or he was involved in something dangerous enough to require pretending he wasn't. By morning, Avery convinced herself she would simply walk away, end things cleanly before she became another woman tangled in someone else's secrets. But the universe had other plans. At 10:30 that morning, her phone buzzed with a news notification. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the headline. Tech billionaire Alexander Whitmore disappears from public life. Company refuses comment. Avery's stomach dropped. Her finger hovered over the article. Slowly, she opened it. The photo that filled the screen made the room spin. Same blue eyes. Same face. Same calm expression. Ethan Whitmore. Except the name beneath the photo read, Alexander Whitmore, founder and CEO of Whitmore Dynamics. Estimated net worth, $3.2 billion. Avery sat frozen on the edge of her bed. For several seconds, she couldn't breathe. The article continued. Whitmore had stepped away from public appearances months earlier after a series of corporate investigations targeting his company's competitors. Rumors suggested someone inside the industry had begun quietly sabotaging billionaire founders, destroying reputations, manipulating markets, and leaking scandals. 3 powerful CEOs had already been forced out. Whitmore had simply vanished, publicly at least. Avery felt the weight of realization settle in her chest. Ethan Whitmore hadn't been lying about being broke. He had been hiding his identity, hiding his wealth, hiding everything. But the deeper question hit her harder. Why her? Why pretend to be someone else just to meet her? Before she could think further, her phone buzzed again. A message. Unknown number. She opened it cautiously. Ethan, I owe you the truth. Please meet me tonight. 8 p.m. Riverside Park. Avery stared at the screen. Part of her wanted to block the number and forget the entire situation. But curiosity is stronger than caution when your life suddenly feels like someone else's story. If stories like this matter, comment and subscribe to Melanin Chronicles. That evening, the air along the Hudson River carried the quiet chill of early spring. Avery spotted him immediately. Ethan, Alexander, stood near the railing, hands in his coat pockets, watching the water like a man waiting for judgment. When she approached, he didn't turn right away. I wondered if you'd come, he said quietly. Avery crossed her arms. You're a billionaire. Her voice was calm, but sharp. You pretended you couldn't afford shrimp. Ethan finally faced her. I never lied about liking the coffee. That's not funny. I know. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Avery asked the question that mattered most. Why? Ethan exhaled slowly. Because every woman I meet already knows who I am. He gestured vaguely toward the skyline. My money walks into the room before I do. Avery's eyes narrowed. So you created a fake life? Yes. And tested me. Ethan hesitated. Yes. The honesty stung more than the lie. Avery shook her head slowly. You didn't trust me. Ethan stepped closer. It wasn't about trust. Then what was it? For the first time, his calm cracked. It was about survival. Avery blinked. What does that even mean? Ethan looked around the park before lowering his voice. 3 billionaires have been destroyed this year. Corporate scandals, Avery said. I saw the news. Ethan shook his head. Not scandals. He leaned closer. Setups. Avery felt a chill crawl down her spine. You think someone is framing billionaires? I know they are. And you think hiding as a broke consultant protects you? It protects anyone close to me. Avery's breath caught. Slowly, the pieces began aligning. You didn't lie just to test me. Ethan didn't answer. Which was answer enough. Avery's voice dropped. You lied because if people knew you were seeing me. Her words trailed off. Ethan finished the sentence quietly. They would destroy you to get to me. The river wind picked up, sending ripples across the dark water. For a long moment, Avery just stared at him. The lie suddenly felt smaller. The danger felt much bigger. Finally, she spoke. You should have told me. I couldn't. Why? Ethan's jaw tightened. Because I didn't know if I could trust you yet. The words landed harder than he intended. Avery stepped back. Congratulations, she said quietly. You just proved exactly why I shouldn't trust you. She turned to walk away. But Ethan's next sentence stopped her cold. There's one more thing you need to know. Avery paused without turning around. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. You didn't meet me by accident that night at the gallery. Her heart skipped. What are you talking about? Ethan swallowed. I was looking for you. Avery slowly turned back. Confusion crept across her face. Why? Ethan hesitated. Then, he said the one thing that shattered everything she thought she understood. Because someone inside my company, his voice hardened, already knew your name. Avery Brooks stared at Ethan. No, Alexander Whitmore, as the weight of his last sentence settled into the cold air between them. Someone inside my company already knew your name. The river behind them moved slowly, indifferent to the storm now forming in her mind. That's impossible, Avery said finally. Her voice was steady, but her heartbeat was not. I've never met anyone connected to your company. Alexander didn't argue. That's what makes it dangerous. Avery felt anger rising again, stronger this time. So your solution, she said, was to approach me under a fake identity? He didn't deny it. Yes. The honesty didn't soften the betrayal. It sharpened it. Avery took a slow step back, the distance between them suddenly necessary. You didn't trust me, she said again. Alexander's expression tightened. It wasn't about trust. Everything is about trust. The wind lifted strands of her hair as she spoke, and for the first time since they met, Avery Brooks looked less like the calm gallery coordinator he had grown fond of, and more like a woman who had fought her way through a world that constantly demanded explanations she didn't owe. You studied me, she continued quietly. You approached me. You built an entire relationship on a lie. Alexander opened his mouth to respond, but she raised a hand. No, her voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority. You don't get to explain yet. The billionaire who commanded global companies fell silent, because in that moment, Avery Brooks held the power. I grew up watching strong black women get reduced to opportunities, she said. Some man with money decides he's curious about them, and suddenly their entire life becomes an experiment. Alexander shook his head quickly. That's not what this was. Avery laughed once, softly. Really? She gestured toward the skyline. You're a billionaire who pretended to be broke to see if I was worthy of your real life. Her eyes met his. That's the definition of an experiment. The words landed harder than anything she had said before. Alexander looked away toward the river. For the first time since revealing the truth, he had no argument. Avery inhaled slowly. Then she said the thing he hadn't prepared for. I'm not interested in your money. He looked back up. But I'm also not interested in a man who needs to test people before respecting them. Alexander stepped forward slightly. Avery. No. Her voice cut through the moment again. This is the part where I choose myself. The words were calm, but final. Alexander's chest tightened. You're walking away. Yes. Even knowing someone might already be targeting you because of me? Avery held his gaze without hesitation. That was never my choice to begin with. The truth of it silenced him. She wasn't wrong. He had pulled her into a storm she never agreed to enter. Avery adjusted the strap of her bag. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I did like Ethan Whitmore. Alexander felt something twist painfully in his chest. He wasn't fake, he said. He was incomplete. Avery shook her head. Same difference. She turned toward the path leading out of the park. Alexander didn't stop her this time, because part of him understood something brutal. If he forced her to stay now, he would prove every fear she had just voiced. But as Avery walked away, he said one final thing. Not loudly, just enough for her to hear. I never pretended to care about you. She paused, just for a second, then kept walking. Across the river, the city lights flickered one by one. Behind her, Alexander Whitmore stood alone beneath the darkening sky. And for the first time since building a billion-dollar empire, he felt powerless, because Avery Brooks had just made a decision most people in his world never did. She chose dignity over proximity to power. What neither of them knew yet was that the war surrounding Alexander Whitmore was about to become public. And when the truth finally surfaced, the entire country would learn Avery Brooks' name, not as the woman who dated a billionaire, but as the woman someone tried to destroy it to reach him. 3 weeks later, Avery Brooks stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes. Not because things had gotten better, but because they had gotten louder. It started with a headline, then another, then a flood. Whitmore Dynamics under investigation for internal leaks. Mysterious pattern targeting billionaire founders exposed. Insider sabotage network uncovered in tech industry. And then, the one Avery couldn't ignore. Private citizen linked to Whitmore case identified as Avery Brooks. Her name, public, uninvited. Her chest tightened as she stared at the screen. The article twisted facts into something dangerous. It didn't call her a victim. It didn't call her innocent. It called her a possible access point, a doorway, a weakness, a target. Within hours, her quiet life collapsed into noise. Calls she didn't answer, messages she didn't read, emails from people who suddenly knew her name but not her truth. By evening, the gallery where she worked asked her to take time off until things settled. Professional language, personal consequence. Avery sat alone in her apartment that night, staring at the city through her window. This wasn't the life she built. This wasn't the story she chose. And yet, she refused to break inside it. Across the city, Alexander Whitmore sat in a glass-walled conference room as legal advisors argued over damage control strategies. She's a liability now, one of them said. We need to distance you immediately. Alexander didn't look up. Another voice followed. If we position her as unrelated. She is related. The room went silent. Alexander finally lifted his gaze. Not defensive, not emotional, just certain. I brought her into this, he said. And now you want me to pretend she doesn't exist? This is about protecting your company. No, Alexander replied calmly. It's about protecting my comfort. The distinction hung in the air. Because for the first time, Alexander Whitmore faced a decision money couldn't solve. Stay silent and protect everything he built. Or tell the truth and risk losing it. 2 days later, the world got its answer. Alexander Whitmore held a press conference. No intermediaries. No scripted statements passed through legal filters. Just him, standing in front of cameras. The recent attacks against industry leaders were not isolated incidents, he began. They were coordinated efforts by individuals inside powerful systems. Reporters leaned forward. And in the process, he continued, an innocent woman, Avery Brooks, was wrongfully exposed and targeted. A murmur rippled through the room. She had no involvement in my company. no access to confidential information, and no role in the events currently under investigation. A pause. Then, I take full responsibility for her exposure. That part wasn't necessary, but he said it anyway, because truth, when spoken late, must be spoken fully. That night, Avery watched the press conference from her couch. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply sat there, absorbing it. The truth had finally come out. Not cleanly, not gently, but completely. And yet, something inside her remained unchanged. Because while Alexander had chosen courage, it didn't erase what came before. The lie, the test, the decision made without her. 2 days later, he stood outside her apartment door. No security, no announcement, just him. When Avery opened the door, they stood facing each other in silence. For a moment, it felt like the beginning again. But it wasn't. I told the truth, he said quietly. Avery nodded. I saw. Another pause. Then he asked the question he already feared the answer to. Is it enough? Avery studied him carefully. You did the right thing, she said. The words were sincere, but not soft. And sometimes, she added, the right thing doesn't fix what the wrong thing broke. Alexander's chest tightened. I can rebuild trust, he said. Avery shook her head gently. Trust isn't something you rebuild for someone. She met his eyes. It's something they choose to give again. Silence stretched between them, and in that silence, both of them understood. Avery wasn't angry anymore, and somehow that made it harder. I don't regret meeting you, she said quietly. Neither do I. But I can't be part of a life that started with me being tested. The final truth. Simple. Unavoidable. Alexander nodded slowly, because for the first time in his life, he didn't try to negotiate an outcome. He accepted it. Take care of yourself, Avery. You too. And just like that, it ended. Not with betrayal, not with chaos, but with clarity. Months later, Avery Brooks stood in a different gallery, a larger one. Her name listed as director, not because of what happened, but because she refused to let it define her. Across the city, Alexander Whitmore rebuilt his company with a different kind of discipline. Less control, more accountability. They didn't reconnect. They didn't circle back. They simply moved forward, changed, and maybe that was the real ending. Not every story is meant to become a fairy tale. Some are meant to become a lesson, a reminder. That love without honesty is fragile. That power without trust is dangerous. And that sometimes, walking away isn't losing. It's choosing yourself. If this story made you feel something, taught you something, or reminded you of your own worth, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Melanin Chronicles. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We tell truths people don't always want to hear.